Hi there, welcome back to Haunting Vales. Today we are going to talk about Annabelle's true story that haunted everyone. Stick till the end to see what actually happened. They said it was just a doll, a soft, harmless Raggedy Ann with button eyes and a stitched-on smile. But the truth written in official case files and first-hand testimonies reveals something far more sinister. In 1970, a nursing student named Donna was given the doll as a birthday gift from her mother. She shared a small apartment with her roommate Angie, and at first, the doll sat quietly on Donna's bed. But within days, they began to notice subtle, eerie movements. At first, they dismissed it as their imagination. The doll shifted ever so slightly in posture or placement, but then the movements became impossible to ignore. The doll would be found in different rooms altogether, seated in new positions, as if it had moved on its own. Donna swore she left it on the couch in the morning, only to come home and find it seated upright on her bed. Angie noticed the same. They would reposition it, only to find it again, in unsettlingly lifelike poses, even with its arms crossed or legs folded, though it had no inner frame to allow for such movements. The atmosphere in the apartment shifted. What had once been a warm, inviting home now felt heavy and anxious. Donna began to feel watched at all hours, and Angie reported waking up at precisely 3 a.m., night after night, drenched in sweat and paralyzed by a deep, unnatural fear. Then came the notes, written on parchment paper they didn't own, with phrases like "help us" and "help Lou," referring to Donna's fiancé Lou, who was increasingly uneasy in the apartment. The handwriting was crude, childlike, and the messages showed up even when no one else had access to their home. The discovery of the parchment paper itself raised concerns. Neither Donna nor Angie kept that kind of stationery in the apartment, and none of their visitors had brought it in. It was as though the paper manifested from nowhere, further intensifying the eerie sense that something unexplainable was occurring. Donna and Angie started to keep a log of events, trying to piece together a timeline of activity, and quickly noticed the pattern was growing darker and more frequent. Lights flickered. Their dog, a gentle beagle, refused to enter Donna's bedroom where the doll was kept, and would often whine at the door, growling at nothing visible. At one point, a crucifix fell from the wall for no reason. Doors opened on their own. Objects would go missing and reappear days later in strange places, like the refrigerator or inside locked drawers. The breaking point came when Donna returned one evening to find the doll with what looked like blood, red liquid, on its hands and chest. She initially suspected a prank, but upon close inspection, the substance did not resemble any ink or dye. It appeared to have seeped from within the doll. Shaken and no longer able to rationalize the events, the roommates contacted a medium. During a séance, the medium claimed she connected with the spirit of a young girl named Annabelle Higgins, who had died tragically on the property years earlier. According to the medium, Annabelle had lived there before the apartments were built and had perished in a car accident. The spirit, said to be lost and lonely, asked for permission to stay in the doll and with Donna, feeling compassion for what they believed was a ghost of a child. Donna agreed. That moment, according to Ed and Lorraine Warren, marked the beginning of an invitation to something much darker. When the Warrens were later called to the case, they stated in their official reports that human spirits do not and cannot possess inanimate objects. What had entered the doll, they said, was not the soul of a little girl, but a demonic entity, pretending to be one in order to gain the sympathy of the living. The deception was complete. After Donna gave it permission, the activity in the apartment escalated. Lou, the most skeptical of the three, was the first to be targeted. He had already expressed concern about the doll, believing that something evil was at play. One night, while staying in the apartment, Lou awoke paralyzed, unable to move or speak. He felt a presence and looked down to see the Annabelle doll at his feet. The doll slowly crawled up his body toward his chest, and he blacked out in terror. The next day, he wrote it off as a nightmare, perhaps sleep paralysis. But it didn't end there. In another chilling incident, Lou heard strange noises coming from Donna's room while alone in the apartment. He entered cautiously, suspecting an intruder, but found only the doll lying face down on the floor. As he approached, he was overwhelmed by a feeling of dread. Suddenly, he felt burning pain across his chest. When he lifted his shirt, he discovered 7 claw-like marks, 3 vertical, 4 horizontal, etched into his skin. The wounds bled but healed rapidly, leaving no scars. These attacks convinced the roommates that they were dealing with something truly malevolent. They contacted an Episcopal priest, Father Hegan, who listened carefully to their story. Disturbed by the level of detail and clear emotional distress, he referred the case to a higher authority, Father Cook, who in turn brought in the Warrens. Ed and Lorraine visited the apartment and immediately recognized the hallmarks of demonic infestation. According to their documentation, the doll was never possessed. It was being manipulated by a non-human spirit as a conduit to eventually possess a human host. The movements, the notes, the attacks, these were the stages of infestation. The Warrens explained that demonic entities start with small disturbances, then escalate to physical harm, and ultimately attempt possession once the fear and trust dynamic is firmly in place. Lorraine, a clairvoyant, claimed she could sense the darkness attached to the doll the moment she stepped into the room. She described it as a presence that was cunning, ancient, and utterly devoid of empathy. With permission, the Warrens took the doll into their care. But the danger didn't end there. During the drive back to their home in Monroe, Connecticut, the Warrens reported that the brakes on their vehicle failed multiple times, nearly causing accidents. Ed had to sprinkle holy water on the doll and continue driving cautiously. Once home, they placed the doll in a chair next to Ed's desk. Over the following days, the doll appeared to levitate, disappear from locked rooms, and even growl. Lorraine witnessed it tilt slightly before falling from a shelf as though it had been shoved. They brought in a priest to bless the home. A Catholic priest came to examine the doll and mocked its powers, declaring, "You're just a rag doll. You can't hurt anyone." On his drive home, the priest's car brakes failed, and he nearly died in a severe crash. He later called the Warrens to apologize and admitted he had underestimated the object's power. In another case, a man visiting the Warren Occult Museum banged on the glass of the doll's case and laughed. Ed warned him not to taunt it, but the man refused to listen. On the motorcycle ride home, the man lost control and crashed into a tree. He died instantly, and his girlfriend, who survived the crash, told police they had been joking about the doll moments before the accident. Incidents like these were documented in detail by the Warrens and by surviving witnesses. Another visitor reportedly fainted in front of the case, claiming he had felt something grip his neck. The doll was eventually locked inside a specially built case made of wood and glass, reinforced with religious symbols and prayers, and placed within the Warren Occult Museum. According to official accounts, the case is blessed regularly by clergy, not as ritual, but as a measure of spiritual containment. Lorraine Warren repeatedly stated that the entity attached to the doll was not human, not once claiming to be demonic, directly, but always using the guise of an innocent little girl. It was a calculated lie, a strategy used by demonic forces to bypass suspicion and gain emotional permission to enter. This pattern of deception is well documented in demonology. Entities disguise themselves as victims to lower their targets' defenses. That's what happened in Donna's apartment. That's how it got in. That's why people still fear the doll, not because it looks scary, but because it doesn't, and that makes you let your guard down. Annabelle doesn't have sharp fangs or twisted limbs. She's made of cloth and yarn, but the damage she's left behind is undeniable, documented not just in the Warrens' files, but in interviews, police reports, and statements from clergy and civilians alike. When Annabelle was first moved to the Warrens' home, Lorraine insisted on immediate containment, citing how vulnerable the doll made everyone feel when it was left in the open. Their daughter Judy was forbidden to go near it. The Warrens had encountered countless haunted artifacts before, but Annabelle was different. It wasn't just haunted, it was a tool, a weapon. The reports didn't stop once the doll was cased. Museum staff reported occasional disturbances, shadows in corners when no one was present, sudden temperature drops, and the faint sound of fabric rustling late at night when the room was empty. According to museum records, Ed installed a warning sign on the glass case. Positively, do not open. That wasn't theatrical flair, it was born of necessity. A priest who ignored that warning and briefly touched the glass reported having nightmares for weeks, always the same. He was trapped in a room with the doll, unable to move, as it stared without blinking. Visitors who disrespected the warning suffered consequences. Lorraine frequently told of a museum guest who claimed he didn't believe in any of it. He smirked, took a picture of the doll, and walked away. Hours later, his camera malfunctioned and deleted every photo, except one. A blurry, darkened image of Annabelle, where the eyes appeared too wide, too human. These weren't isolated events. The Warrens kept meticulous records. Clergy who visited the museum to bless the artifacts often expressed discomfort around Annabelle's case. One priest, according to the Warrens' own files, left the room without completing the blessing ritual, citing a sudden, crushing feeling in his chest. When he returned later, flanked by two other clergymen, he completed the ritual, but only while maintaining physical distance. The fear was real. In 1981, after the infamous Devil Made Me Do It case, in which the Warrens testified that a man named Arne Cheyenne Johnson had been possessed by a demon, Lorraine claimed that Annabelle's case became even more active. She wrote in her personal diary that she heard a tapping on the glass late at night during that trial, a sound she'd only heard once before, years earlier, when Lou had been attacked. Ed doubled the protective measures around the case, reinforcing it with iron nails and additional holy inscriptions. Over time, the public's curiosity grew. Media outlets and documentary crews requested to see the doll, and many were given access. But nearly all of them reported strange malfunctions. Cameras would die even with fresh batteries. Audio recordings would pick up static or whispers sometimes, replaying backwards. The Warrens never allowed anyone to film the inside of the case directly. They said it wasn't about protecting the object's mystery, it was about preventing viewers from making an energetic connection, even through a screen. Lorraine believed that even seeing Annabelle too closely or disrespectfully could create a psychic tether, drawing the entity's attention. And they had proof. A college student who visited the museum for a project reportedly began to experience sleep paralysis and hallucinations within days. He claimed to see the doll in his dorm room, staring from the corner. His roommate verified the screams in the night. His grades dropped, his personality changed, and eventually he withdrew from school entirely. His final report, mailed to the museum, simply read, "I believe you now." The museum closed in 2019 due to zoning issues, but the doll remained under strict watch in a private location. Even after the Warrens' passing, Ed in 2006, Lorraine in 2019, the caretakers of the museum continued their practices. Tony Spera, the Warrens' son-in-law, frequently updates the public and confirms that the doll has not changed. It is still housed in the same protective casing, still regularly blessed, still surrounded by objects considered dangerous, but none quite like her. Tony recalled once that when they moved the doll for cleaning of the case, a certified priest was present. They handled it only with gloves, and even then, all electronic equipment in the room went haywire. Monitors flickered, lights dimmed, and the temperature dropped nearly 15 degrees within minutes. It returned to normal only after the doll was resealed. In a rare recorded interview from the 1980s, Ed Warren described the case in chilling detail. The mistake was not the doll. The mistake was the invitation. The minute the medium convinced them this was the spirit of a little girl, and Donna said yes, she gave it permission to move in, that's when everything escalated. You see, demonic forces can't cross thresholds unless invited. This one didn't come with fangs or fire. It came with sorrow. It said, "Please help me." And that's what made it so dangerous. Lorraine added in the same interview, "People don't understand that evil doesn't look like what you expect. It wears a face you'll trust. This wasn't the spirit of a little girl. This was a calculated manipulation. The doll was simply a tool, one that pretended to need love." When asked why the Warrens continued to keep Annabelle in the museum instead of destroying it, Ed replied firmly, "You can't destroy what isn't of this world using earthly means. We've had priests try burning it. The entity only detaches and moves on. This is why it has to be contained, not destroyed." Lorraine nodded solemnly and said, "It's like a doorway. You don't burn a doorway, you lock it, and you make sure no one opens it again." Later in that same interview, Ed recounted the night he brought the doll home. "The brakes on the car failed. We were doing 60 on a back road and almost hit a tree. I reached into the back seat and threw holy water on the doll, and the car stopped right there. That's when I knew this wasn't some haunted trinket. This was a conduit, a demonic link." Lorraine spoke about her personal visions upon entering the apartment where Annabelle first stayed. "There was a black shadow behind the doll," she said. "I could feel its rage. It hated being exposed. And it hated Lou. It targeted him because he saw through it." Tony Spera, years later, echoed those sentiments in public talks. "I've watched people faint in front of the case. I've seen equipment fail. I've seen seasoned investigators walk in confident and leave pale. I don't tell people to be afraid. I tell them to be respectful, because this isn't a story. This is real." People often ask, is it really possible for a simple, mass-produced doll to house something demonic? The answer, according to demonologists and theologians who've reviewed the case, is no, because the doll isn't what's haunted. It's a vessel. An object doesn't need to be magical to be used by dark forces. The entity that once roamed Donna's apartment isn't confined by cotton or buttons. It uses the doll the same way a parasite uses a host. It makes itself known through fear. It feeds on attention, and it waits. The psychological impact of the Annabelle case has been profound. Even skeptics have admitted that the consistency of the reports, the diversity of the victims, and the continued activity make this one of the most credible paranormal cases ever documented. Psychiatrists who've reviewed Lou's testimony say his symptoms don't match sleep disorders or psychosis. He displayed acute trauma, often associated with physical assault or near-death experiences. Every detail from the initial haunting right down to the claw marks was recorded under sworn statements. Donna, who vanished from the public eye after the Warrens took Annabelle, has never publicly spoken about the incident again, but letters from Lorraine's files indicate she continued to suffer nightmares for years, sometimes waking up, convinced the doll was back. When Hollywood adapted the story into films like Annabelle and The Conjuring, they changed key details, opting for cinematic fear over documented fact. The real Annabelle doesn't slam doors or fly across rooms. She waits quietly. She deceives. She mimics grief. She invites sympathy. And when she is welcomed in, she never leaves quietly. In the years since the museum closed, online rumors spread, claiming that the doll had escaped its case. Tony Spera issued a video denying those claims, holding the camera up to the sealed glass and the warning sign. But the fact that such a rumor could gain international traction in hours shows just how deeply Annabelle lives in public consciousness. The fear is universal. The Warrens' files contain over 70 logged incidents involving the doll, ranging from injuries, car accidents, psychological breakdowns, to dreams so vivid they cause people to seek therapy. And all from one doll, one object, one presence. That is why she remains locked away. Not because she is fragile, but because people are. And while the church won't declare her demonic in official terms, multiple exorcists have confirmed what dwells near that doll is not of this world. The electronic equipment in the room went haywire. Monitors flickered, lights dimmed, and the temperature dropped nearly 15 degrees within minutes. It returned to normal only after the doll was resealed. But that wasn't the only time this environment shifted. Tony Spera has recounted several moments where simply discussing the doll in depth seemed to bring odd occurrences. Objects moving slightly in the background, doors creaking open without cause, and more disturbingly, a low, mechanical whine that seemed to come from the case itself, even when no power was connected to it. Paranormal investigators who've gotten close to the case often leave shaken, unable to explain the dread that fills the air, and more than a few have abandoned their footage entirely after reviewing what they captured. The most unnerving detail: the doll never moves on camera, but the surrounding objects sometimes do. One of the most cited incidents occurred in 2016 when a group of skeptical YouTubers were granted private access to Annabelle's case under strict supervision. During the tour, one of the group members repeatedly joked about the doll, tapping the glass and mocking the legends. Less than 24 hours later, he was involved in a motorcycle accident. He survived, but sustained injuries consistent with being thrown across pavement at high speed. In the hospital, he told a nurse he heard the sound of small footsteps behind him right before he lost control. The footage from their session at the museum showed nothing unusual, except for one frame where the doll's head appeared tilted, slightly different from before. It has been debated online for years, and though skeptics call it pareidolia or simple coincidence, the timing and the aftermath remain disturbing. Tony Spera has also referenced an alarming moment in 2020 when, during a scheduled blessing of the artifact room, the priest fainted after reciting prayers in front of the Annabelle case. Medical professionals ruled it a sudden drop in blood pressure, but he claimed before losing consciousness he saw the doll blink. He has since refused to return. And yet, even in isolation, Annabelle continues to have an impact. Individuals who have seen photos of the real doll online, some even as part of spiritual forums, have claimed to suffer from nightmares, intrusive thoughts, and cold drafts in their homes shortly after viewing. None of these cases can be scientifically confirmed, but the volume of similar claims is significant. Perhaps the most compelling aspect of the Annabelle case is the way it changed seasoned paranormal investigators. Lorraine Warren, who had spent her life seeing, feeling, and enduring encounters with the unknown, always singled out the Annabelle case as one of the most dangerous. She wrote in her journal that the presence attached to the doll was not limited to one location. It was intelligent. It learned. It fed on interaction and emotion, growing stronger when dismissed and underestimated. This wasn't just a haunting. It was a possession of space, of perception, of reality itself. When she died in 2019, some close to the Warren legacy claimed that even in her final days, Lorraine spoke of Annabelle in whispers. She feared it wasn't over, that it never really could be. The legend of Annabelle continues to spread, not because of Hollywood, but because the evidence doesn't go away. Real documents, eyewitness statements, and decades of consistent corroborated experiences form a case file unlike any other. It is not about a doll moving on its own or growling in the night. It's about manipulation, deception, and the very real psychological and spiritual consequences that follow those who interact with it. The story has found its way into college lectures, theological seminars, and criminology courses not as fiction, but as a study in belief, trauma, and the unexplained. Even the Vatican has reportedly requested access to notes on the case. The real Annabelle is still locked away, in the dark, watched constantly. Not for show, not for profit, but because those who understand her know what's at stake. In one of his last interviews before passing, Ed Warren was asked if he ever regretted bringing the doll into their home. He paused and said, "I regret that it exists, but not that we locked it away, because if we didn't, someone else would have paid the price." And now, as the years pass, as the films fade, and the facts remain, Annabelle is more than a case study. She is a warning, a boundary, proof that not everything that looks harmless is safe, and not everything unseen is imagined. If you ever find yourself doubting the reality of the supernatural, remember this case.
Read the documents, listen to the voices of those who survived it, and above all, never, ever mock what you don't understand, because it might just follow you home. And there's more, because even the controlled environment where Annabelle
is kept today is not completely free of danger. The museum, once located in Monroe, Connecticut, was under constant protection, not only to guard the public, but also to shield the object from those who might attempt to use it for ritualistic purposes. In one chilling event in 2017, a man broke into the Warren Occult Museum reportedly to test the doll. He was found unconscious on the floor near Annabelle's case, clutching a small crucifix and mumbling incoherently. Authorities determined he had no known medical conditions. The man refused to speak after the incident. Hospital staff said he exhibited signs of catatonia. Many experts in demonology agree that Annabelle represents a rare kind of spiritual threat, one that doesn't simply haunt a person or place, but attaches itself to intentions. Father James Labar, a Roman Catholic priest and exorcist who worked with the Warrens on several cases, once remarked that Annabelle was the most dangerous item in the collection, not because of what it had done, but because of what it might still do. He believed it functioned almost like a beacon, drawing in dark energies and amplifying them. This belief is not without precedent. In other cultures, similar objects, vessels that act as bridges between the physical world and malevolent entities, are sealed, buried, or destroyed. But destroying Annabelle, according to the Warrens, was not an option. Doing so would release the spirit. In 2022, a rare opportunity was given to a well-known academic specializing in religious demonology to study the Annabelle case and the associated physical logs. After reviewing years of written records, audio, tapes, and correspondence from witnesses, she published a restricted access white paper arguing that the Annabelle case represents a transcendent intelligence manifesting across dimensions, a phrase that startled even seasoned investigators. Her findings were never released publicly, but snippets were leaked. One of the most concerning conclusions was the theory that Annabelle isn't bound by proximity, that even referencing or showing her likeness could act as a conduit. Since then, museums around the world have begun reviewing their own artifacts for similar signs. Some have removed items from display. A few have even shut down paranormal exhibitions altogether. Whether reactionary or not, the fear is no longer rooted in what Annabelle has already done. It's in what she may become. As technology evolves, and more people connect across platforms and shared beliefs, the possibility of spiritual resonance, of collective consciousness manifesting and amplifying energy, is no longer science fiction. And Annabelle may be the first documented case showing exactly how dangerous that can be. So, before you dismiss it as superstition, remember this. Hundreds of people have crossed paths with Annabelle in some form, and not all of them walked away unchanged. Some were scarred, some were shaken, some never spoke of what they saw again. If you made it this far, you know the truth isn't just stranger than fiction, it's more terrifying, and we've only scratched the surface of what lurks behind the world we see. For more real stories like this, stories that chill, disturb, and stay with you long after the screen goes dark, subscribe now and join us as we uncover the darkest cases ever recorded. This is not just a video, it's a record, and you're part of it now.